So we're good to start. So my name's Amanda Conway. I'm one of the careers consultants at the University of Manchester Careers Service. And I'm also one of a team of us in the Careers Service that particularly work to support students with psychometric tests or employer selection tests. So today's session is part of the International Connections Conference, and it's focusing particularly on how you can demonstrate your skills effectively on employer selection tests. It's very likely that you're going to face some sort of selection tests as you go for graduate roles, whether that's for year placement, whether it's for internships, whether it's for graduate positions themselves. And if you're not already experienced them, it's probably likely you'll face them at selection or in a role or during your career. So I hope you find this session useful. We're going to talk for about 45 minutes or so. We're going to then take questions. But throughout the session today, there is a chance for you to have a go at some of the questions and to also find out where we can help you further and where you can go on and practice lots of tests and get lots of support. So I hope you find that useful, and it will be quite a practical session. Just make sure you've got pen and paper with you, and if you want to grab a calculator, because there will be one of the questions where a calculator will be useful. So just make sure you've got all of that with you. I think that's most of what I wanted to cover in the pre-run to getting started with the session. I'm going to ask you to sign in, if that's okay, to register your attendance at the session today. Oops, sorry. And there's a QR code there. If you were able to scan that for me, it just means that we can know the type of people that have come to the session, particular degree disciplines, but it also means we can send you a copy of the slides as well. So if you can use the QR code, that's great. If not, there is a link I can put in the chat. So just let me see if I can find my chat box, and let's see if we can get this. So everyone in the meeting. So here is a link in the chat box to the survey as well. So you can just sign in. If you can't use the QR code, you can do that. If you struggle to use the Qualtrics link as well, you can put a direct message to me of your name and your student ID and perhaps an email address, and we can make sure we add you on, but only if you're struggling to use the QR code or that link in the chat box. So hopefully we'll get everybody signed in, and it just means we can keep in touch with you with a copy of the slides and let you know where the recording is as well. But generally all we use it for is just to see the kind of students that are attending our sessions, degree, discipline, year of study, that kind of thing, just to know that we're reaching everybody. So my first question to you all really is, how are you feeling about psychometric tests? And is there anything in particular that worries you or you'd like to focus on or you'd like me to cover? So I'm going to ask if you can use the chat box. I'd be really interested in knowing how are you feeling about psychometrics? So either you're feeling okay, what you'd like me to cover, or anything in particular that worries you, any particular types of tests. So it's all anonymous in that we won't be calling out particular names. It's just to get a general sense. So we've got a good group of you. We've got over 60 of you in the session today. So it'd be really nice just to have a flavour of some of the things that you're thinking. So I've got, great, someone said they're very tricky. I would like some tips. Absolutely. And they can be varying levels of difficulty. And sometimes the first time you take them, it is quite a shock. Sometimes there's a speed element to some of the tests, like ability tests, and it can feel like it's really difficult. Or if you're not sure what's going on and what the employer's looking for, it can be hard to know how to play the test. So we'll definitely cover that today. Anyone else want to make any comments for me? If there's any particular type of psychometric test that you worry about the most. Okay, some comments coming through. Okay, so people are saying they've taken the UCAT test. Okay, yeah, there is some similarity. Sometimes it's about those kind of reasoning skills. Absolutely. So we will be looking at that. And And sometimes the UCAT test can be a good practice for some of the other kinds of tests as well. Okay, behavioural, psychometric tests, absolutely. So behavioural tend to be things like about how you behave. So they're also called situational judgment tests, which is very much about how are you judging a situation? How do you know how to behave and respond? And I think that's probably the kind of test that bothers students the most. And I'll come on and explain. So we're definitely covering situational judgment tests. And also numerical reasoning tests being mentioned, we'll absolutely have a look at that. The games, we're going to cover the games as well. So great. I think we've got a good session for everybody. Someone said, as an international student, I don't even know what kind of tests we have. Absolutely, you know, you will see different tests in different countries. The reasoning tests, sort of numerical reasoning, verbal reasoning, there's an organization called SHL, and they're in 60 different countries. So there's a good chance you might see some of those kind of reasoning tests, maybe less so with the games-based assessments around the world, but increasingly behavioural and reasoning tests. So I think if you're well practiced in the tests that we have, there's a likelihood there's something a little bit similar. What we've got to consider is what the employer is looking for, and we'll talk about how you can decipher that as we go through. So I think we've got a good sense of what people are thinking. Just generally help me out with tests. So we'll go on and we'll do that now. So let's move through. Thanks for everybody for signing in. So what we're going to focus on today, we're going to look at generally the different types of tests you're likely to face and what's behind them and what's being looked for. We're going to have a go with a few real examples, and then we're going to focus on some tips, strategies, and recommended ways for you to prepare. So hopefully there's something in there for everybody. So the first thing to say is, what kind of tests are you likely to face? And the overall term for psychometric tests actually embraces a few different types of tests. And you've got those things called ability and aptitude tests, which are very much about specific abilities and looking for your abilities in certain areas, those kind of reasoning skills. You've also got the blue section about your kind of motivations, behaviours, how do you respond? And that can be a reflection of your personality, it can be a reflection of your values. So it's not just about your kind of like cognitive reasoning. And then you've also got these things called games-based assessments, which can feel very different, but underpinning those are looking at your particular personality characteristics and how you typically, again, prefer to respond or behave in particular situations. So there's a real interplay with personality, situational judgment, behavioural. What drives your behaviours and how do you typically behave? And then you can compare that to things like the aptitude and ability tests, which is more about your reasoning skills. When we've surveyed some of the big graduate recruiters, so the larger organisations across the UK, and these are often multinational organisations, there's about 60% of them are using these kinds of selection tests. In the past, it's been more, it's been up to about 80%. So there's been some variation in use of tests while organisations try and work out what's the best way to select candidates. But in general, it is a common factor of the selection process. Sometimes these are before anything else, like before interviews, even before the application form stage. So they are a critical stage to focus on because they come quite early on in the selection process. And that's because you can get through significant volumes of applications this way, and you can whittle it down. So today we'll focus particularly on the aptitude tests, the kind of reasoning skills about verbal, numerical, and logical. We'll look at situational judgment tests, and then we'll touch on personality, but with a particular focus on games-based assessment. So if we start with aptitude or ability tests, you will either see a test that focuses on your verbal reasoning, your numerical reasoning, or your logical reasoning. We'll focus on all three of those today with an example, and we'll focus on what that involves and means. But this is very much about your abilities, your specific capabilities. So it's very much that you are compared with what's called a norm group. So they have a view of the likely performance of the group in question, and that might be students, it might be UK students, it might be engineering students, depending on how they want to focus. And then your performance is compared against this norm group. So it's very much about your ability to reason with information. Can you reason with written information? Can you reason with numerical information like data, like charts and like graphs? Or can you reason with symbols? Can you see a pattern and follow a logical process and work out the next stage in that pattern? So it's very much about this cognitive processing skill. What tends to happen with reasoning skills is that there's also a time pressure. So it's about your speed and your accuracy. So it's very unlikely you finish one of these tests. And sometimes that time pressure can impact on your performance. So it's just a reassurance, really, that you can still get through a selection test without finishing the test, but you do need to work quickly. And so it's a question of speed and accuracy. I'm going to come on to talk about a free practice site that we pay for. So the University of Manchester pay for you to access Graduates First, which is a practice site. And when you have a go with the reasoning test, you get back your kind of like your performance against both speed and accuracy. So you'll find out whether you've been really accurate, you've been getting lots right, but you haven't been going very fast, or you'll find out whether you've been very fast, but maybe not getting things right. So it's often a combination of the two. So we'd encourage you to focus on both speed and accuracy, and using Graduates First will enable you to do that, and we'll give you some help on that. So the first one we're going to look at is a verbal reasoning question. So here's an example one for you. So what I'd like you to do is have a look at this question in the blue box, and then what I'd like you to do is say whether each of those three statements, 1, 2, and 3, whether the information is true, false, or you cannot say based on what you've read in that passage, and only based on what you've read in that passage. So this is very much about how you reason with written information and how you infer and kind of work out what that passage means, and what can you know from what you've read there. So I'll give you a little moment to just jot down A, B, or C for question 1, question 2, and question 3. Keep hold of your thoughts, and then I will ask you in the chat in a moment what you think. Okay, does that give us all enough time? So let's have a look. So the first statement, government policies have been an important influence on the birth rate in recent decades. Do we think that is true, false, or cannot say? Is anybody going to pop something in the chat box for me? Oh, we've got people commenting, that's good. Okay, so we've got lots of cannot says coming through. Anna, and a few trues. Quite a lot going for cannot say. So the first one is cannot say. It doesn't say anything about what has influenced the birth rate, more that the birth rate has changed voting behaviours. Okay, so that one is cannot say. The second one, are we thinking that is true, false, or cannot say? We've got a bit of a mix. We've got some trues, we've got a bit of false, quite a bit of true coming through. That one is true. It does say that restricting numbers of children in the family is subtly altering class structure. Okay, and then the third one, what do we think there? Are we going for A, B, or C? True, false, or cannot say? We've got a mix going on. We've got an A, B, and a C. Okay. All right, real mix. Okay, this one is cannot say. It's actually saying both of these things are actually influenced by age structure. So you'd be welcome to look at this again on the recording, or if you want to go over this, but that just gives you a little bit of a flavour of the kind of question you're looking at. So it's very much about only taking what you've got in the passage and not taking on any other information there. We'll come on and talk about how you can practice and some tips and strategies for reasoning tests in a moment. We're just going to look at a numerical one first, though. So let's skip to a numerical test. There's some little ticks for you. And here we go. So here's some information. And we've got a couple of questions for you. Just moving my box around. I can't see where I am. There we are. Okay, so you've got a chart of information there. It's about phones, the sale of phones over 5 years. So from SMTT Phones Limited. And you've got two questions there. You've got a question, we called it 4A, about the most profitable year for the phones. And the second question about the greatest profit as a percentage of turnover for any 1 year. So if you'd like to just have a few moments to have a go at one of these questions, and then we'll talk about some thoughts about this one. When you're ready, if you want to pop in the chat box what you think your answers are, it will just give me an idea of when people are finished, because it can take people different lengths of time to do this. So I will stop speaking now until I see things pop up in the chat. Okay, so we've got some comments starting to come through. So what do we do with the first one? The first one, the answer is C, 2005. It says on the chart, profit is turnover minus cost. So you don't normally need to know some of the kind of business terms like profit, but it can be useful just to be familiar with some of the basic terminology, just so you feel a little bit more comfortable with it. And so it is profit is turnover minus cost. So you would take the turnover figure, you'd take off the cost, and you'd see which one was the highest for each year. So the profit was 64,000. With the second one, the answer is E, because you need to then take that profit figure and divide it by turnover for each year, and then times it by 100. So you're doing a percentage. And the year was 2004. So at 37%, that was the highest level. Just a few comments then about numerical reasoning and how to kind of practice for this. If you are looking at numerical reasoning tests, the level of difficulty and the level of maths that you're going to be doing is no more than what you would have been doing at the ages of 14, 15, 16, and the exams you would normally take at 16 around the world. So it's things like percentages, ratios, currency conversion, so going from one currency like dollars or sterling to another currency like yuan, and so it's can you make those conversions, and those sorts of things around profit, in terms of percentage changes, that's the thing to brush up on and to focus on. So anything in the UK, it's called GCSE level, what the exams you would take at age 16, and that's the sort of level to look at. So there are some links. There's an education site called BBC Bite Size. Again, they've got those kind of practice sessions, but we would recommend, if you use graduates first, which I'll come on and talk to you about, what you can do is you can practice all of these tests. There's at least 7 to 10 different tests that you can take about numerical reasoning and also about verbal reasoning. But you can, any questions that you get wrong, you can click on the cross and it will tell you how you should work it out. So you can go over and look at the maths and look at the processes as well. So for us, that's a really strong resource, because you can see where you went wrong and you can work on that and brush up on that. So it's very much about being slick with calculations, like how do you work out a ratio. We'd also say it's looking at shortcuts. So if you were looking at this question, 4B, as you're working things out, sometimes you don't need to do the full calculations. So as you're looking at those percentage differences, you'll get to 2005, and then you'll notice that the number on the top for the next years, for 2006 and 2007, the number on the top of your calculation is going to be smaller, the number on the bottom is going to be bigger, so it's never going to be higher than that 37%. So you might be looking at shortcuts. So if you're comfortable with the maths, you might be looking at, well, actually I can see from those numbers that it's not going to be a bigger number. It's also just worthwhile checking, is the chart about what I've been asked about? So this is all about SMTT phones, but is the question about SMTT phones? Is it about a 5-year review, or is it a different question or a different chart? If one chart talks about females, the question might talk about males. So just to check that the data you're looking at is the right data as well. So sometimes there are some little cheeky questions that just check that you've checked that the data is correct as well. So it's very much about looking at being slick on the calculations and the basic calculations, but also, can I tell from the question or the nature of the answers that some of them I can discount and say that they're not the right answer. So for example, with question 4B, sometimes it might not be a percentage. Say answer C might be £26. Well, you know it's not right because I'm looking for percentages. So sometimes looking at those little caveats as well. So those are the two answers. And then lastly, we're looking at logical reasoning questions. So here you've got a series of symbols on the top row from left to right, a logical sequence of 5 boxes. And then what you've got to work out is what the 6th box will be. So that will be over here. Okay, and you've got 5 choices, A, B, C, D, or E. So I'm going to ask you if you can just pop in the chat box for me which one of those 5 symbols the next box should be, please. So lots of C's, lots of C's. Okay, I just spotted a question in the chat box. Thanks for posting that, about calculators. Would we be able to use calculators? Usually, absolutely, yes. And the thing to remember is you're going to be taking these tests now remotely from your home, from a room. It's going to be done online. So the likelihood is you've got a calculator available. No one can stop you using it. So the calculator is usually very much a part of a numerical reasoning test. So I would say yes. Sometimes in the past, when questions and tests were done in a classroom, then it might be a paper and pencil test, no calculators allowed. But now it's very much about calculator use. So I'll just check the chat box. Yeah, no more questions come through there. That's great. So thanks everybody. It is C. And what you've got is actually a sequence of patterns going on. So you've got in the top left-hand corner, it goes circle, not, and then the circle moves down, then it moves up, then it moves down, then it moves up. So you've got one pattern going on. You've got the star moving from top right to bottom left, top right, bottom left. So again, that keeps moving. And you've got the arrow moving every second box, swapping direction. So you've got a series of different patterns going on, and the triangle's going from white to black to white. So you're combining a series of numbers of different patterns into one. Now, if you do the logical reasoning questions on Graduates First, I actually found some of them quite hard. So it's a good site to practice up because it's pitched quite high. It's pitched quite difficult. And because it's got the discussion about the pattern and what's going on, it's actually a really nice learning resource as well. So our tips for ability tests. The first tip we would say about how you can really show your skills in an ability test is to check about the test provider, which company are providing the test that the employer is using. So if you were applying to, say, British Airways, and they use a particular test from a company called SHL, if you know, you can look online and see if there are any practice sites for that particular test provider. And then you know you're practicing a test that's very similar to the one you're likely to face. You can ask who the test provider is of the organisation that you're applying to. That's absolutely fine. If not, using things like Graduates First. And on our career service website, we've got a section for psychometric tests and lots and lots of links to other test sites as well. So we've put all the links that we know of to the free tests. We've not linked to any paid for tests. If we've linked to a site that has a paid for test, we've linked you to a specific place on that site where there are some free questions. So our absolute tip is practice. These kinds of tests, ability tests, have quite high predictive validity, which means that they can quite closely predict how you're likely to perform in a specific kind of role or kind of that skill set in the future. But it can only predict that if you are giving your best performance on the day that you take the test. And practicing helps cut out any of the interference of you not giving your best performance. So because you're familiar with the calculations, because you're familiar with a test setting, because you're familiar with that type of question. So the practice just helps take out any of the interference. So do brush up on your numeracy and your literacy. Also, we'd say, think about your test setup. Are there definitely no interruptions? Have you turned off all the notifications on your phone? Have you told your housemates? Are you sort of well rested? Is there nothing else going to get in the way? Okay, and with that, we'd also say have a calculator that's not maybe on your laptop, a separate calculator, so you can use it quite easily. The same with the mouse on your laptop. A kind of handheld mouse is sometimes easier than a laptop mouse. So just think about what would help you work quickly as well as knowledgeably, because that speed is sometimes a big part of it. So it's all about the practice, we think, with ability tests. I think that's the critical part, and using Graduates First would help you to do that. So here's the QR code which links you to Graduates First. Alternatively, on the Career Service website, and I'll show you in a moment how to get onto Graduates First, you can have a look at that link. And as long as you register with your university email address, it will know that you're a University of Manchester student and will give you access to the full set of tests for free. If you just Google Graduates First and then you register, it won't know that you're at the University of Manchester. So there's a specific link, and you get that from our Career Service site, or you can use the QR code here. Okay. Okay, so we'll move on now briefly, and we'll look at situational judgment tests and what they are. So these are the things that are more like behavioural tests as well. So how do you respond to a situational judgment test? What is it about? And this is about very much giving you a scenario. It's giving you a situation that you're likely to face in the job. It could either be a written scenario, where it talks you through a situation and gives you some options to answer, or you might see a video clip and someone talks you through a scenario. And sometimes with organizations like the emergency services, you might get a virtual reality scenario and it's almost like happening around you. And that's again to see how you would respond in a very sort of busy, chaotic situation with lots of things happening. So it's trying to see how you're likely to behave in the role. And so situational judgment tests are increasingly popular with organizations, and about 50% of the big graduate recruiters are using them at the moment, to give you a flavor of their use. And it has really increased. And probably the popularity for the organization is that they can tailor this situation exactly to the kind of situation that they have in their organization. So they're very targeted. So we'll have a little go at some of those situational judgment tests. The critical thing, though, is that it's very much about, it's not something that you can practice in the sense of become quite polished with, like a reasoning test, because every time you take one of these situational judgment tests, it's a bit like starting again, because it depends what the organization are about, and it depends what kind of behavior they want. So you, instead of getting good at the test, what you need to get good at is understanding the employer. So for every organization you're applying to, it's a different kind of homework needed. It's about getting under the skin and into the mind of that organization and looking at what they think is important, what kind of behaviors are important for them. So let's have a look at some scenarios. So this is a recorded scenario. I'm going to see if I can link through. I don't know if it's going to work that way. I'm going to just stop sharing for a moment, bear with me, and I'm going to share. I just want to share it directly into YouTube, so apologize for that's it. Just bear with me, because I don't want to, sometimes it doesn't play, so I don't want to give you a link that doesn't play. Just move that out of the way, thank you. I think it's, yes, it's this one. So I'm going to see if you can hear this okay. Let me know if you can't hear, please. Just
I can't hear anything.
oh, brilliant, thank you. Okay, let's see. Let's just see if I can get, I know why we can't, we need to share the sound as well. Thanks for telling us. Thanks, Nolene. I was just noticing in the chat, so thanks everyone that just commented in the chat as well. Right, I'm just going to see if we can move it and get that back. Right, fingers crossed, guys. Let's see if you can hear this time. I'll put my volume on maximum as well.
You're sitting at your desk. Suzanne comes over.
Hi, I'm glad I could catch you today. I wanted to speak to you about these conference calls. Once a week is a bit much, don't you think? Most people just share the same information and end up repeating themselves. To be honest, I try to just carry on with my work when I'm on the call. If someone needs something from me, they can just ask, right? Can you make them every 2 weeks? Or, even better, we could just send an email if there are updates.
Okay, so thank you for that. So that one was the scenario that we're given. So we just get back into the presentation. Bear with me. It sometimes doesn't link through or play, so that was why we went a different way. And here now is the situation that you have. So we have in our situation, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 responses that you might give. And at the top in the boxes, you can see how to grade each response. So you can either say it's a 1, which is counterproductive. So it means it will make the situation worse. It could be a 2, so it will not help the situation.
Excuse me, sorry, on your screen we can only still see YouTube, we can't see your slides.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Thanks for that. That's great. So got lots of playing around here. So let's go back to, let's try this one and this one. And can you see my slides now, guys?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. So here we go. That's the joy of presenting via Zoom, isn't it? So we've got, now I'll start again so you can actually all be with me. So I've got 4 possible responses to Suzanne. So you've got those 4 sentences in the middle of the screen. And then you've actually got, in the box at the top, a way to grade each response. So you can either say it's counterproductive, which means it will make the situation worse. You can then have giving it a 2. So you're saying it will not really help the situation, so it's not really changed. You can give it a 3. So it's useful and it will be a help, so the situation will be improved. Or it can be a 4 and it will help to resolve the situation and take the problem away. So you need to grade each one of these. And that's typically what you might get with a situational judgment test. You might either have to pick out ranking the order of the responses, so which one's from best to worst. You might have to choose what's your preferred response or your least preferred response. And it's just as important that you tell the employer which is the worst thing to do, as well as getting it right, what the right thing to do is. Or you might be grading them like this, but usually you'll have a situation, you'll have some responses, and you'll have to have a view on the right responses there. So this scenario was actually used by the Cabinet Office, sort of the UK government, for their selection in the past. It's not used now, but it was used in the last few years. And they were very much then looking at particular behaviours that they were looking for. So we'll come on and talk about the particular behaviours, but this is the grading. So I think I've just released them. So that was clever, wasn't it? So you've got a grading on the different responses. So if you want to think about whether you thought about these same things. So the first response, explaining to Suzanne, it's really important for everyone to know what's going on. You're open to reviewing other ways of sharing information. You will ask the team about this. Now that was given a 4. Okay, so that was given an effective response. And what I'd like you to think about is the kind of qualities you think were being looked for by the Cabinet Office. Okay, so we've revealed the answers, but why? Okay, what was going on there? So if you want to pop in the chat, based on how these have been scored, and we'll go through the rest, what kind of qualities might be looked for. The second one, so very much with the first one, you're looking at, let's solve this situation. Suzanne's not happy, what can we do? We're asking the rest of the team. The second one, if you think the calls are important, you don't have to join them, you might miss out. It's 2, it's not helping the situation. I would probably you could even argue, because Cabinet Office wouldn't give us the exact responses, that this is a 1, because if Suzanne's not going to the meetings, actually she's in a worse position because you think you've communicated to everyone and you haven't. The third one, say to Suzanne, it's important you share information across the team. You'll see if there are some alternatives to a conference call and trial some different options. So that's given a 3. Okay, it's some help. So why is that one not as good as the one that's given a 4, the first response? Okay, so what qualities are being sought by this organisation? And then the last one, just moving my little box, we've done it for a while now, no one's complained, you don't need to change anything. So sometimes you could think, well, the situation's no worse there, it's the same situation, but actually it's a 1 because Suzanne then feels like she's not heard, nobody's listening to her, and her kind of queries are being dismissed. So I'm just going to check in the chat, see what you've all been thinking. Okay. So we've got comments, communication with the team, teamwork, open to changes. Great, some interesting comments there. Yeah, thank you. Any more coming through? Okay, so we're talking about leadership. Well, actually, I think you're putting it out to the whole team. So I don't think we're giving it Suzanne quite, but we're giving it somebody else. Okay. And I think that's an important point. And so, have I got it on the next slide? No, I haven't. The qualities that the Cabinet Office were talking about, one was about collaboration. So for every organisation you're doing a situational judgment test for, they will talk about the values that are important for the organisation or the qualities that they're looking for, that will either be in the vacancy or on the organisation's website in the section about us or our values or our drivers. This thing that these behaviours that they think are important for all staff. For the Cabinet Office, it was about collaboration and teamwork, so that we're using the knowledge of each other. So if I go off and try and solve Suzanne's situation and I'm researching alternatives, it's all about my effort and not about the collective wisdom of the group. So that collaboration was really important, and that's why it came out as 4. And also behaviours were around change and improvement and that kind of driver for improvement. So to not always think that this is the best situation we're in, there's always a better way, there's always new things coming up. So to keep moving forward. And those were the 2 behaviours that underpinned the kind of question response here and what was looked for. So having in your mind what the employer's about and what qualities are being sought can help you just bear in mind the kind of behaviours that might be behind some of the questions. Okay, so let's have one more situational judgment test. And this one usually splits the room. People usually have a different response to this. So I really like asking this question because everyone has a different view. So this scenario, you're doing a current project and you're working with colleagues across different teams. You need them to provide you with some critical information before you're able to get on with your own tasks. They were due to send you the information by lunchtime yesterday. It's now 10 o'clock the following day and you're still waiting. What do you do? So here we're looking for your most likely to do and your least likely to do, please. So you've got A, B, C, or D. And I'd like you to tell me, I'd like you to write most and then a letter, and least and then a letter, please, in the chat. So I'll give you a moment to have a look at those ones. So whenever you're ready in the chat, just drop those in for me. That's great. Right, so we've got a little mix of views. Okay. And I think this one as well, sometimes there are some sort of cultural variations in this as well. So I'll talk about the rationale behind this question. This is one that was seen in another graduate training programme. It was an engineering organisation that one of our students at Manchester experienced, and she screenshotted it for us, and then we've unpicked it with lots of recruiters about the sorts of things that they were looking for. So I feel quite confident about this one and what's going on there. So in response to your comments, we've got a real mix. We've got people going for A as most likely and B, and there's a couple of C's. And then in terms of least likely to do, we've got a real split between C and D. Okay, so I'll talk you through what we would say, okay, but before I do that, I'd just like you to pop in the chat what quality, what kind of behaviour or quality you think is being looked for. What's the kind of behaviour behind this, do you think? Okay, so someone's saying problem solving, initiative, okay, being flexible, okay, being proactive, respect for colleagues, collaborations, a real mix, isn't there? And there's probably a little bit of all of these things. What I would say, lovely, I'm liking it, keep going, great. Responsibility, that's a good one. So what it was behind here, we think, was about drive, okay? Proactivity and drive. You want to make stuff happen, okay? You're kind of focused, driven, working towards kind of the quickest and best outcome. And so the way we would have scored them from most likely to least likely, A would be the most likely to do, okay? And I'll explain in a moment why. Followed by B, followed by C, followed by D. And this kind of proactivity and drive is about, you need to sort this out. You can't do anything. You've been waiting, you've done the email, or you've done, you know, you're waiting for them. So get on the phone. And there seems to have been a real sort of behavioural shift, as we all kind of like text all the time now, and it's all about communication via text or via email. We're less likely to get on the phone. I mean, I never answer, very rarely my phone rings, and very rarely do I answer it. So that kind of shift in behaviour in my home life, but in work, get on the phone, okay? Talking to people, things happen, can be resolved very quickly. If you send another email, is the email down? Is there something wrong? Are they not in? If you get on the phone, someone say, oh, they're not in, they're out of the office, something's happened. We can contact someone else. And it can be about relationship building as well. So, but that getting on the phone is much more instant, and you get a response. And then it could be sending an email, but emailing is quite passive, okay? Asking your manager, we're looking at, I know a few people commented there about initiative and being proactive and those leadership skills. What can I do? What can I solve myself before I need to contact my manager? How can I resolve this quickly first? And only really contacting my manager if it's completely out of my level of responsibility, or I've tried lots of different things and I'm out of options. Okay, so in the UK, and sometimes you maybe see it again, sort of behavioural variations, because sort of hierarchy is sometimes more important, and managerial responsibility. But in the UK, very much about that kind of, where an organisation say they're looking for leadership, proactivity, initiative, they want you to do what you can before you go to a manager. And then the last one is around doing nothing. So the least preferred option is often just doing nothing, because really in D, you're just sitting back and hoping for the best. And that really isn't a preferred response, because when we're looking for particular qualities like making things happen and being driven, just waiting isn't really a preferred option. So I hope that gives you some insight of what's going on underneath these kind of questions and what organisations are looking for. So how can you practice and improve your performance on situational judgment tests? It's very much about knowing what's behind the questions, or what's behind the organisation. So when you have a go on Graduates First, there's a couple of situational judgment tests. This is the behavioural kind of chart which plans out how well you did, and you will see that these were the kinds of behaviours that are often behind some of the situational judgment tests, like being innovative and leading and trying to solve a situation, and wanting to resolve something quickly and in a timely manner. And you will come out either a really strong score, an average score, or actually improvable. So this is, if you're performing along these lines, these are the kind of areas that the organisation are looking for. They can see, actually, is this candidate not so strong in these qualities? It might be that you don't move forward to the next stage of selection, or it might be that they want to then explore those qualities with you at interview, and maybe look for some examples of those behaviours in other things that you do. So it doesn't automatically mean that you're discounted from the selection process. Sometimes they use other kinds of tests or selection methods as well, just to check out those behaviours in other ways. But sometimes it can be very much that you don't go forward to the stage of selection. Just to give you a sense of how competitive it is, with situational judgment tests, sometimes the cutoff for who doesn't get taken forward is higher, so more people don't get through with a situational judgment test. So sometimes that's why people feel it's a hard stage of selection, because it's quite the scoring level is quite difficult sometimes with the kind of behaviours that are looked for. So you can sometimes find this as quite challenging. So it's very much about looking at what do the organisation want from you. So understanding the organisation, understanding the job and what qualities are sought with that job. So if it's very much a kind of sales-based role, it's very much about, you know, building good relationships with people, empathy and understanding your customer and client. That's very much then going to come through in the test that's for that role. You could also think about your own values and preferred ways of working, and is there a gap? You know, if you aren't very proactive and leadership oriented, is that because you haven't had much experience in that area, don't feel confident in those behaviours? Is it a time to get more experience with that sort of thing? It doesn't mean that you can't go for these roles in the future, but it might be about building some experience first. And then lastly, just practicing and having a go again, building up that confidence with the kinds of questions to face. So situational judgment tests are in graduates first. They're also on an organisation site called Assessment Day. And the questions in Assessment Day, you get to see the answers, but you also get to see the quality that was being looked for, which is a nice development tool if you're looking to practice your skill in this area. So let's move on. We've not got as much time to go through, so I'm just going to quickly show you games-based assessment. And if you have got questions you want to ask me, if you want to start popping them in the chat, then it just means we can make sure we cover them. But I'm just going to quickly show you some games-based assessments. What I will do is I'll now nip into graduates first, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. Bear with me. Just got my little toolbar on Zoom gets in the way. Right, so just want my little toolbar to move. Hang on, let's see if I can bring it down here. Yes, let's try it this way. So this is graduates first. And when you get into graduates first, you can go through it through the careers service site. And when you get in, there are lots of different tests down the left-hand side here, and then you can go in and do lots of different tests. So for example, in numerical reasoning tests, under ability tests, there are now 15 different numerical reasoning tests you can take. I'm just going to scroll down this side on the left and go to games-based assessment. So games actually means games-based assessments rather than a fun place for you to play games. And there are now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different ones that you can do. What I'm going to just quickly show you is this one called BART, which is equivalent to a balloon burst game. So you'll all have access to this. And with this game, I want you to tell me what qualities in the chat that you think are being sought by this organisation. So the instructions are that there's a balloon you're going to inflate. And I'm going to sort of play it for a little moment so you can see it. And you either have to keep inflating the balloon, and every time you inflate it, you make more money. But if the balloon bursts, you don't make any money. So you've got to decide at which point you collect the money and start again with a balloon. So there are 15 balloons to get through, and you'll see as we start playing how it works. So here's a balloon. I'm going to inflate it. Keep going. Shall I go again? Yeah. Right, I'm going to collect now. So I've made £60 there. I'm onto my second balloon. I'm going to inflate again. Oh, it's burst, right? So I made nothing on that one. So what I'd like you to do in the chat box, oh, right. I might collect now. What you want to tell me is the quality that's being assessed. What kind of quality do you think are being assessed with? Oh, right, okay. This. Let's see what. Okay, let's see what everyone's saying in the chat. Okay, so we've got some risk assessment, learning from experience, continuous improvement, learn from previous mistakes. Yeah, judgment. Okay, a few comments there. Excellent. Okay, so I will tell you what was being assessed. I'm going to just nip back into the slides briefly. So there we go. So I'm just going to share with you what qualities were being looked for. I jotted them down somewhere. Yes, here we go. So absolutely, emotionality and risk taking. So how prepared you are to take risks. You know, do I try once more? Do I go again? But also with that, it's a kind of decision making and adaptive learning, because once you start noticing, actually, it's not bursting after 5, it's bursting after 4 or 2, or the situation's changed. So it's how do I adapt and how do I manage my work, and that decision making process. And also that kind of staying calm under pressure. So there's lots and lots of data points with these games-based assessments. And what we'd often say is, don't try to predict what you think the games are about, just play them, because sometimes they're looking at different qualities. So you're trying to show one set of qualities. There was one about how you work with someone else and you try and make lots of money, but everyone thought it was about making the most profit. But the game was actually, it was a Unilever game. It was about collaboration and sharing and working for everybody to get the most money. So while some people think, oh, it must be about profit, it must be about making the most money, it was about collaboration. So sometimes trying to second guess, just immerse yourself and play these games. But what's behind them are those personality characteristics that traditionally you would have a personality questionnaire about, but the psychologists became very aware that we just try to represent ourselves in the best way. But while we're playing games and we're focused on a task, actually our personality characteristics come through much more true to life than how we behave. So as international students, you may see some of these, but more so probably with multinational organisations or in a UK Western setting, which is where they seem to have grown out of from cognitive psychology. So the kind of qualities that might be looked for would be drive, again, that drive to deliver results and to make things happen. Cognition, so how you can process what's going on and make sense of what's going on. It might be about memory. Can you remember particular shapes and where they were? Can you remember a sequence of numbers? But it also might be about your interpersonal style and how you collaborate with other people. Or can you recognize emotions and expressions on different faces? So there's 5 different games-based assessments to play in Graduates First. We would say it's important to think about, again, the kind of qualities the company are about, what they're looking for, but overall just play them, because you don't really want to be second guessing what's looked for. So these are some of the organisations that are using games-based assessments to give you a flavour of the kind of organisations that are looking for them. That's what you've just played. And those were the qualities. So it came out as a kind of an emotional stability, but it was very much about decision making, coping with ambiguous information, calm under pressure, and risk taking, which is what's behind all of that. And those were some of the other qualities, which I think I've probably just mentioned most of them. So that sense of how much effort goes in, because for some of these games, it's going to be really frustrating, and it's, do I keep going? Do I keep going? Can I learn from what's happening? Do I stay flexible? And can I sort of remember certain things? So it's a real mix of your kind of cognitive reasoning, but with your emotional and social traits as well. So our biggest tip again is to just have a go. So with games-based assessment, it's probably very much the same sort of good practice. But another critical factor is, because you'll be playing this on a mobile device, usually your phone, just make sure all the notifications go off your phone. And it's the only things that are popping up is what's on this game, just because the distraction will be there and it will sort of take you out of the flow. So for me now, the only thing I wanted to comment on was if you'd got any questions that you wanted to know about. And these are some questions that often come up about psychometrics. So if I know it's just gone 12, so I'll just be a couple of minutes running over if that's okay. Nolene, does that fit okay with the schedule if I run over for a few minutes? If you're there, I don't know if she's still there. I think we're probably okay, but if you do need to go, it's fine. Great, thanks Nolene. But if you do need to go, that's absolutely fine. But I'll stay on the line just to talk about some people's common questions. But these ones, are tests normally negatively marked? So do you lose a point when you get a wrong answer? there isn't usually negative marking, but if you've got lots of them wrong, so for example, if you're halfway through a reasoning test and you think, well, time's running out, I'll just answer all ones, or I'll just put A for everything. It does look at your accuracy versus your reasoning. So it's noticed if you are guessing, and then that doesn't reflect well. So we would say don't just answer, rush through things and get them wrong. Try and do as well as you can. Should you declare a disability, what will happen if you do? It's very much your choice if you want to declare any disability. But we want to give you the opportunity to give your best performance without any kind of interference in that. And so do employers. So employers often encourage people to declare a disability if they have one, if they feel that it would enable them, any reasonable adjustments could help them compete on these tests fairly. So employers are often quite happy to offer additional time or any other adjustments that you might need. So if it's very difficult for you to play games on the phone, just let them know. Often that part of the selection process might be removed. If you've got some sort of disability statement, if you have additional time in exams, again, and you've got some sort of statement from the university, you can share that. You often get given 25% additional time. It won't automatically be picked up. So if you've declared anything on a equal opportunities monitoring form, on the early stage of the application form stage, it won't normally be taken through to the test provider. You will have to get through to let the organisation know, you've invited me for a test. I will need reasonable adjustments. I do have a disability. Is there an opportunity to have additional time, or I think I might need a particular reader for my laptop or some support. So if you feel you need extra support, or you just feel you want to talk through what the options are with the organisation, if you're not sure, because you've maybe not taken these tests before, employers are often encouraging of you to do that, but it is your choice. It's completely your choice. I'm rubbish at tests. Should I just give up? We would really say, please don't give up. Just keep practicing, because we have noticed with students, practice can make a significant difference. Just being familiar with the type of question, familiar with the settings, and looking over with the practice sites where you're tending to go wrong can help you really focus your attention. And then lastly, international students and tests in your own language. The verbal reasoning tests are about your cognitive reasoning skills, not your language ability. So some organisations will say, yeah, you can take it in your native language or in a different language. But some organisations are saying that because the job might be requiring English language fluency, they want you to take the reasoning test in the language of English, or for the particular country. So it can be worth asking the question, but it's not necessarily that you would be given it in a different language. So it does vary, but it is a question you can ask if you want to. And we have seen some students being able to take it in another language. So those were the common questions we often get asked. If anybody's got any other questions that they want to ask, very welcome to put it in the chat. But I think that's pretty much all the slides I wanted to go through. If you didn't get a chance to check in, I think, don't know if the slide, it's still there to register your attendance, so I'll leave that up. But if not, I'll just look at the chat to see if there's any more questions coming through. I don't think there's anything. People might be typing. So, and the last QR code is just to our psychometric pages on the Careers Service website, or there's the link at the bottom. And we've linked to as many practice sites as we can there. So if you go into the particular pages on, for example, reasoning tests, it links you to all the reasoning tests that we know of. But we would encourage every one of you to register with Graduates First and use that as well. So I can't see any questions coming through. No. So if not, I'll just say thank you very much for listening, and I hope you found that useful, and really encourage you all to practice, and let us know if you need any more help. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing now with the site, and I'm going to stop the recording as well.